Sam. I'm here with Gabe Christian, attorney, historian, Pan-Africanist, and here to talk about how the Prime Minister of a small state foiled a coup attempt. Gabe.
Yes, thank you, Sam. So Dominica, where you and I were born, is a very beautiful island. It's one of the most beautiful islands in the world. Very nice piece of Caribbean real estate, very much prized. And in 1981, there was an attempted coup d'etat to overthrow the government of Eugenia Charles, who had been then prime minister for about a year. She came in July 80, so she would have been there for about a year and months. And in September of 1996, I interviewed her in Upper Marlborough. She'd retired after serving 15 years as prime minister. And one of the things I asked her about was about the coup of 1981. I was on the island at the time. It was an attempt by the Dominica Defense Force under the command of Frederick Newton to overthrow the government with the support of Malcolm Reed, who was in jail but orchestrating things. Malcolm Reed and Patrick Judd had been arrested earlier for their involvement in Operation Red Dog, an attempt by the American Nazi Party and Ku Klux Klan to invade Dominica and install a white supremacy regime. Now, that was their plan. You know, Patrick Judd may have thought he was using them, but certainly they thought they were using him. The FBI arrested the mercenaries coming from New Orleans in the earlier part of 1981, but the people on Dominica who were involved in the coup planning decided to do their own coup in December of 81. But something happened earlier that was amazing. Eugenia Charles got word that the Defense Force Captain Malcolm Reed had been seen in the heights of Jurodel interacting with people who were part of the Rastafarian movement, or called Dreads, under one Leroy Etienne, aka Pocosion. And there had been gunshots heard. And so she called in Major Frederick Newton, the commandant of the Defense Force, and said, I've been told that some of your rifles are missing. The suspicion was that they'd given rifles to the Dreads. She already had inkling of the coup d'etat, in a sense, through Algie Marthy. Algernon Marthy had been a Black Power associate of Rosie Douglas in Canada, who'd returned and was a Rastafarian, and who broke the news of the mercenary coup. So she already had an inkling. So she called then Commissioner of Police Oliver N. Phillip into her office and said, look, I have the commandant of the Defense Force here with me. I know that the guns were not their guns, they were loaned to them from the police armory. Take a police truck and go and get all the guns for me today. And Mr. Phillip, Commissioner Phillip, who we knew, you and I, we grew up in the street next to him, said yes. And he went and retrieved all the weapons. What were those weapons? Well, the weapons they had were old British Lee Enfield rifles Mark IV from World War II. And they had also the Belgian FN rifle, the SLR, an automatic weapon. As long as you squeeze the trigger, all of the 15 or so rounds in that magazine, or 20 rounds, will eject, okay? Or will be fired. And she went down the roster of the serial numbers that the police had at their headquarters for all those rifles and compared them to the rifles. Ms. Charles said she did that herself. I said, Ms. Charles, what caused you to do that? She said, you know, Christian, when something comes to my mind, I just do it. And then she called back the commandant and said, listen, I found 5 rifles missing. So I don't think you're doing a good job in managing those rifles and their care and their security. So I'm going to have the police hold on to them. So in one fell swoop, she disarmed the Dominica Defense Force. Shortly after that, she demobilized them or sent them home. But by that time, they had been disarmed. What she also did was, she said to me, she procured from England a 1-ton padlock. I've never heard the term before.
1-ton padlock.
1-ton padlock. Now, as cadets, you and I were cadets at the Dominica Grammar School in the 70s. We would go to that same armory at police headquarters.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we knew what the armory was, and there was a padlock. And so the defense forces who also frequented the armory, they would know what the padlock was. So on the evening of December 17th, when they assaulted police headquarters, they came with a sledgehammer. But the padlock that they met was not the padlock that we knew or they knew. It was a 1-ton padlock that through some bolt of illumination from the heavens, Eugenia Charles had sought to procure and had installed, and they battered that padlock, Sam, all night under a fusillade of covering fire to protect themselves. But you could not break the lock. And with the streaks of the early morning sun rising in the east, they fled for their respective homes. What did they have? They didn't have the old Mach 4, which was a very powerful weapon, if not antiquated. They didn't have the SLR, which was a very powerful weapon. That was a weapon used by Winston Filbert, who shot Corporal Harold Piper at the prisons where he was part of the coup plot, and he was one of those killed. One of the weapons recovered was an old Winchester from the cowboy days that Major Newton had, and they had an old blunderbuss or double-barrel shotgun and one or two sidearms. So they were poorly armed. And because they were poorly armed, and because we had a prime minister who had some superior wisdom in the way she was brought up, she had, for someone who was a lawyer by training, who'd gone to University of Toronto and the London School of Economics during the war and after the war, she had a very strong grasp of bookkeeping.
You said a grocer's daughter.
She was a grocer's daughter. You know, Eugenia Charles, his father was a banker, but her mother was a grocer. So they knew about bookkeeping and so on. I said, Miss Charles, how did it come into your mind to think about serial numbers? She said, Christian, all equipment have serial numbers. And when it didn't match up and I realized that guns were missing, I took the arms away. And
you said that in the context of Mr. Honeychurch, Lennox Honeychurch's father, had been kidnapped.
Earlier that year, Lennox Honeychurch's father had been kidnapped by the same group of persons who those guns may have gone to in the hills. That is the group led by Leroy Etienne. So there was an attack on their camp, and in retaliation, they burnt the home of Lennox Honeychurch's father, Ted Honeychurch, and kidnapped him. And he was later killed while trying to escape. And Mr. Phillip, you know, I remember left on or made a statement on radio appealing for
Commissioner O.N. Phillip.
Commissioner of Police Oliver Norris Phillip, graduate of the London-based Hendon Police Academy, supposedly the Harvard of British Police Training Schools. Very eloquent gentleman. He says, I remember, my memory serves me right, to those persons who detained Mr. Honeychurch in the woods, your further detention of the gentleman serves no useful purpose. And you are well advised to release him immediately. Of course, you know, that didn't happen, but here was a person, and he, by the way, Mr. Phillip was wounded in the attack on police headquarters on December 17th, the morning of the 18th, when he was alerted to the gun battle. He took his trusty German Luger automatic pistol and went to police headquarters to investigate and was shot in the head. But the bullet grazed him, knocked him out, broke his jaw, crashed his car. He was rescued and brought to, I think, military hospital in Martinique, and then later to Walter Reed here in the US. And
it's amazing the providence. We averted a major bloodbath, and with all these weapons and what people can do with weapons who are of not good intention. We see what's happening in St. Lucia, in Veyfort. You know, I think 9 people were killed on a weekend. We've seen the number of murders. It looks like it's subsided somewhat in Dominica, of all the gangs and the shooting. So it centers on the weapons. If Miss Charles had not commandeered those weapons, it would have been a different story.
Well, I wanted to do this brief video to really have people remember the quality of our leadership. This is about transcendental leadership. Eugenia Charles was not someone you had to agree with about everything, but she saved Dominica from tyranny, because that's what the Ku Klux Klan and Mercenary vision would have resulted in, a tyranny, a racial tyranny with bloodbath. It would be like Haiti or some other failed state. And further, by having that basic intelligence that she displayed, she prevented those state-owned weapons from falling in the hands of criminal elements, elements that were intent on upsetting the constitutional order. Major Newton, regrettably, someone who I had camped with, was later tried, had his day in court, and unfortunately suffered death by hanging. Corporal Howell Piper, unfortunately, perished again at the prisons. He was shot by Winston Filbert, who was a police guard at the prisons. Police officer Alexander was shot and killed at police headquarters. And that morning, our good friend from childhood days, Sergeant Major Ashton Benjamin, was shot.
Indeed.
You know, so we lost lives that we need not have lost. And we faced traumatic events that we need not have faced if persons were disposed to behaving in a democratic rule of law fashion. That is, you go to elections, you've lost, fairly and squarely, you move on. In Dominica now, as we know, we have a tyranny on our backs because the elections are not free and fair, and the country is lawless and run by a money laundering criminal enterprise that imperils all of us, including themselves, because the people that they're moving with, when their monies are imperiled, they don't care who they hurt. They will come and get their money in true gangster fashion. So what you see in St. Lucia right now is gangsterism. May not have a governmental component, but the society is falling apart. What you see in Dominica is the same thing. Gangsterism at the top, gangsterism in the society. Compare that to the period when Eugenia Charles stood strong to arrest any rot in our character or any sort of deviance towards anarchy and armed insurrection in violation of constitutional norms. You can see the dichotomy between that time. So this
and how many guards?
One second. This video memorandum is in a way to remind us of how important leadership is and how important rule of law is. And so when we speak, we don't speak because of partisanship of United Workers' Party versus Freedom Party or UWP versus Labour Party. We speak as children of a police officer and grandchildren of police officer that our people need to ensure we have leaders that are law-abiding, that are strong and of integrity, and will stand as Eugenia Charles stood. And something she said before I conclude, she said, Christian, they killed Honeychurch after they kidnapped him. But I've said to the police, if they kidnap me, do not pay any ransom. They can do what they want with me, because I'll stay here and I'll do my job until the end. She was very Churchillian and very strong. And we must remember Eugenia Charles. She not only saved Dominica, but in 1983, she saved Grenada as well when she backed the intervention, which was really a rescue mission. This is 40 years, 1983, 2023, since that intervention. And we have to remember her fondly and pay tribute to her for having acted quickly to save Dominica. And again, another Caribbean island, not her own, Dominica, was saved in 81. She saved Grenada in 83.
Thank you. She only had one guard most of the times, did she?
Yeah, only one guard. She said to me,
she
was very brave. She was very brave. She said lots of police officers came to her home the night of the attempted coup, but she sent them home afterwards and said she's all right. I said, did you ever have a gun yourself? She said, no. What am I doing with that? So Eugenia Charles is an amazing person, very brave, very strong. Let us always remember her.
Blessed memory.
Blessed memory. Any final thoughts, Sam? I know you're the interview.
Well, you know, we have to rescue our people, focus them on, you know, science, technology, engineering, and math, the cadet corps, which we're both members of, you know, to instill discipline, to build a force field against drugs and alcohol, and really be focused on living a substantial life, you know, getting that, focusing on training, averting all those distractions, and really making a better life for ourselves. We as a people, Black people in the Caribbean, Kalinago, colored people, you know, we are at the bottom of the totem pole. We have to accept that reality, and we have to be able to uplift ourselves. And we do that by maintaining solid relationships with our families, nurturing our children and focusing on education, law and order, decency, and public safety.
That's right. Thank you, Sam. I just want to say it behooves all of us, no matter our station, to make that meaningful contribution to the onward march for civilization. What Eugenia Charles did, we are now still the beneficiaries of it. So too will future generations be beneficiaries of the good that we do today. Thank you so very much for listening.
God bless.